Hi everyone, welcome to On Point. My name is Christian Chiu. This is episode 6. The SGA has recently filled all open positions in the Senate, and Daniel Fenton is no longer a senator, which is really unfortunate because I, for the longest time, have been wanting to make this joke somehow.
Young Danny Fenton, he was just 14.
I recently got a chance to sit down with Chris Shemanski, the Assistant Director in the Office of Student Life. I know Chris from his role as advisor to Redshift magazine and the Student newspaper, as well as his presence in SGA affairs. Chris, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
So, Chris, what do you actually do?
Meanwhile,
That's a really good question. I think a lot of times students may see my title and not know what I do and how I can perhaps help them throughout their time at Stevens. And so I look at it as I'm very much entrenched in their co-curricular, extracurricular activities. And so with that, I advise the student government, in particular, work really closely with the cabinet, in supporting the Senate, as well as Founders Day Ball and helping oversee that. I also facilitate and oversee our Leads program, so our Emerging, Advancing, and Transforming Leaders seminars. I support and advise the Entertainment Committee. I help manage and oversee the rest of the 110 growing student organizations that we have here, as well as oversee our orientation leaders and select and recruit and train them, help with orientation programming. Really, you name it, a lot of those outside of the classroom activities, I have the privilege of working on.
What is your salary in Kit Kat bars?
Good question. I would say I have no idea for the fact that I'm actually, fun fact, allergic to chocolate and all nut products. So I've never purchased a Kit Kat. So I couldn't accurately give you how many Kit Kats is my salary. But
Oh no.
I imagine just a couple.
My condolences.
What do you have for your birthday? Pie?
My favorite birthday treat is Tres Leches. So that 3 milk cake typically has no nuts and definitely has no chocolate. So that's usually my go-to.
Nice. I'll have to keep that in mind.
Yes, next December 6th, feel free to come and bring me a Tres Leches cake.
Okay. So, what year did you enter Stevens as a student life coordinator?
So I came in fall 2013, in particular November 21st. I started in my role.
Nice. What was the progression from coordinator to assistant director?
So when I was hired, a lot of my work was really on the student organizations and supporting our now Associate Dean of Students, Christy DeMel, in a lot of that club oversight. And through time, I was able to get more experience and more oversight with orientation, as well as with our Leads program, as that was something within our graduate students, as well as Christy, I've recently taken on that. So it's been a gradual progression of more and more responsibility, and also just more opportunity for me to engage students in new ways and hopefully reach more.
With Stevens' goal of increasing diversity, I'd like to know, what does diversity mean to you, either diversity in terms of background or ideology?
I would say it's an understanding and an appreciation for all differences. And so when we think about race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, political ideologies, any of those, and providing a space for all those to be able to contribute and share and learn, and really just be able to take advantage of all of the life experiences and the backgrounds that each person brings. Because when we create that space through language, through our messaging, I think people have a greater opportunity to learn and grow, and really just contribute to, our community and beyond.
I can respect that.
Do you know what this past year's acceptance rates were?
I don't. I know, through our office with orientation, since we're more of responsible, our admission folks do a phenomenal job in doing that outreach and recruitment and go through the admissions process. On the back end, when the students do come, I would say that last year, and I believe this year, it'll be in the same ballpark of around 800 incoming students, but the specifics with acceptance rate and some of those other demographical areas I'm not privy to within my role.
Are you aware of how low the Roach acceptance rate is? Why are so few Roaches applying, getting accepted to, and excelling in the Stevens community?
Roaches in the real sense, as in exterminating little bugs?
I
or...
take offense to that.
I would say, to speak to students, I would say Stevens does a really good job in terms of its retention rate, which is, if you want to talk numbers, I am aware of those. It's in the high 90s. I want to say around 96, 97%. And I think it's in part due to our small community. And I think students often maybe not see how much we do genuinely care about a student's experience, and that they're feeling welcomed, that they're finding communities, that they're finding camaraderie and spirit with being here, from support from professors or staff members, administrators, whatever that may be. I think has contributed to that higher than I would say average retention rate.
Yeah, and I've seen community in Redshift, the Astute, SITTV, even CPAC, the planning board for the convention, and APO. I pledged one semester. So can you explain the benefits of becoming a recognized student organization?
Absolutely. I am very passionate about the conversations that I have with students when it comes to the new organization process. In particular, the framework that Tommy put in last year as CCSI, now with Sundus, working with her as VPSI, those conversations really reignite a passion in me of why I do what I do, because to me I look at student organizations as communities. How can we provide some structure for a group, for other students to find interest in and find community with? So like you mentioned with APO, whatever those communities are, if I can at least provide a framework and some structure to make that happen, that makes me so excited. It's not what new policy is Chris creating. To me, it's all about providing those spaces for students to come together. And so, the process I think is very intentional now. We have these open periods of time where students can submit their form, meet with 2 student life staff members and the VPSI, and really flesh out good conversation of why, what's the purpose of this group? How are you going to help the community? And what is this going to do to enhance our programs and offerings? And really just dissecting and thinking through the whole process, because it's not as simple as just, hey, I like whatever activity, let's bring it. No, let's be thoughtful and intentional with what we're doing. And so then after that, and then having that student input with the subcommittee, and then going in front of the Senate, I think it just gets buy-in, it gets really great visibility across campus. So I think the process now is much more streamlined to help the group ultimately be successful.
Definitely.
How might I personally become a recognized student organization?
Well, you have to identify an interest. Do you have any interest that's currently not being met?
Probably.
Hey, well, you know what? If you think of one that's not currently, I'm happy to talk through that with you. Of course, during the open periods when we're having those meetings.
So you had said that you're planning the leads sessions. Can you explain what transforming leads is? I know it's the third level,
right?
But I don't know much more about it.
Yes, many students don't, and that's why I'm creating it, and also just to provide another outlet. So let me give you a little bit of an idea of the program. So it's definitely now within my time seen a bit of a shift in our framework and the approach that we use. So there's something that I'm now talking about with students, which is called the social change model for leadership development. And it's really rooted in students, individuals coming together to do something to better the community, that positive change piece. And so the 3 tiers are focused on different aspects. So we have the emerging, which is focused on your individual values. So looking at your consciousness of self, looking at your congruence, so looking at your values, do they align with your actions? And I think the other one is then commitment. So what does commitment look like beyond just, hey, I'm interested in this, signing up for this? really doing some of the legwork. Advancing is focused on group values. So how do we operate as a group? How do we build a team that will help us do the best and be the best? And so that looks at controversy with civility, which is super exciting. We look at, I can't remember the other two, it's slipping my mind and I should know them. Common purpose and forgetting it, but there's another C. And then to get to your question with transforming is focused on the community society value. So you take you're more familiar with yourself, you know how to work with a group. Now how do you use those in tandem with being a citizen? So the final framework is of citizenship. What does that mean? Do we ever talk about that? Do we talk about civic engagement? Citizenship's often just looked as voting rights. Well, it's more than that. It's more than just those things. So how do we create a spirit of doing things for the greater good in whatever capacity that will be? So those 3 steps, and then with transforming kind of gives you that holistic look at leadership with lots of other principles in that. So managing people, motivating others, developing an identity, those type of things are all part of the Leads program.
So a transformational leader has those values and has developed those skills throughout the years?
Yeah, it's my hope that at the very least, students, by participating in this, are looking at leadership in a different way, or just looking at it at all. Because of, perhaps some of the offerings here, there isn't that many opportunities to have these smaller conversations because most Leads seminars are 15 students or less, and you really get to analyze things that are happening in the world. I look at right now, there's a ton happening every single day, and so dissecting decisions, making what is ethical decision making. So it's really giving students sort of a non-credit bearing opportunity to think critically, reflect on their values, and maybe ultimately how they can help our community.
Interesting.
Do you have any favorite senators, be it SGA or United States?
Often when you are a senator, it's really the selfless role where you are trying to reach out to your constituents, your districts, being representative and making decisions that benefit all of Stevens. And it really goes a lot without any sort of formal recognition. And it takes up a lot of time. I hear all of the meetings, subcommittees and senators are having, and trying to just meet with students. And so I would say largely I have all the respect for all SGA senators. And then politically, there's certainly some that I certainly more identify with given my ideologies. And I think to me, SGA senator, US senator, acting in the best interest for your community members is important, and maintaining your values when you make decisions, I think, is super important in any aspect.
Absolutely.
Do you have a favorite Biden meme?
All those Biden memes. They made me quite sad as November was coming, or not November, as January was approaching. I would say, I don't know if it was a meme, but it was more of a moment, which then generated a meme, of President Obama giving Vice President Biden the Medal of Freedom, I believe, in one of the final days. And it was just this surprise moment that looked so sincere and really highlighted the friendship that they had, which I think is very unique to that role. So I know I don't have like a funny one, but that Medal of Freedom imagery and what happened that day was really cool.
Nice. You had spoke about the Senate. There's some discussions in the Senate on how some communication isn't transparent. I'd like to set the record now for all of you watching. How does the SGA cabinet and student senators liaise between the Office of Student Life and the student body as a whole? So like when the cabinet comes to you and the other administrators in student life, like what sort of meetings do they have? How often do they communicate? That sort of thing.
Okay, so first I would say in terms of our office, it is maybe surprising to some, but it is a free-flowing, open door. There's a lot of activity and students that are meeting for various reasons, whether it's with Christy, Thea, Jaquise, Ryan, Mike, Brielle, Jane, you name it, there's always students coming up, meeting us with maybe something specific that they have a question about, or maybe they're just talking about life and maybe new opportunities, or talking having generic conversations. And so I very much view as communication between SGA or any student to be, we are an open door and welcome conversation on any topic that pertains to a student and their time at Stevens. And so for me in particular, as the advisor to the Senate, to the SGA, is I'm meeting with the cabinet and REBA right now every other week to sort of talk about, hey, what's going on in the Senate? What are some concerns that maybe students have? Some changes that they'd like to see. I in turn also bring in things that have developed perhaps within our office. Usually they're pretty, they're not very often. I'm more of like programmatic wise, like right now we're really in the trenches of Founders Day Ball and making sure everybody's on the same page. It really varies, but we always consistently have those every other week meetings. Furthermore, I spend time with, in particular, Sundis, the VPSI, meeting with her in those off weeks, as well as with Tommy. There's always a frequent communication. We also do meetings with Sarah Klein as the assistant vice president for student affairs, with some of the cabinet members. So there's this always communication. Communication's always open between administration in our office and the SGA.
Nice.
So with the SGA, obviously they're concerned with event cost and attendance, whether it warrants the cost. In your experience with helping to facilitate On Point Music and Arts Festival, what do you think are some key variables in bringing in and retaining a large audience?
I think, it's hard. Event planning is definitely difficult. And then more is at stake as more money and time is invested. And it's my goal in working with the festivities committee chair, anyone that's looking to plan one of those, is that really challenging them, asking them the questions to sort of, not ensure, because there's nothing as a guarantee, but ask them the questions that make them think through the whole process and that they're learning from the experience. Because one thing about a festival that's different than, say, your general body meeting or your event that you may have on a Wednesday night at 9 is that there's just a lot more at stake, a lot more visibility. And so trying to ensure that they meet their goals and meet their passions, because they usually have a really, really strong interest in whatever they're trying to do, and guide them in a way that we try and be successful. Some things we can't control, like the weather, certainly can play a part in student attendance. Space, we all know space. Yes, we're creating some new spaces. Can't wait to see those come to fruition as we see some construction already on campus. But dealing with space, and so when there's, we maybe can't do a rain location. So this past year with On Point, it was definitely a chillier, misty day, which probably had an impact on the numbers. I think the music, the genre, plays into it, and if students are interested. I also can say, based upon my experience, length of time also has an impact. So when you're looking for that effect, like I want to be in the space and there's 1,000 people, it's hard to get that. It's hard to get that when an event like a festival On Point this past year was around almost 10 hours-ish. It's a long time, and so how do you, certainly not going to capture 1,000 people there for 10 hours. If we got that, I would be shocked. But you have it has its ebbs and flows throughout the day. In my time, the shorter events, I think we see more, at least in one shot, because if you don't come within that 2-hour period of time, you miss the event. And so when we look back, chain smokers is something I was just talking about with one of my colleagues earlier today, and how cool that they were at Stevens, 2 years ago now, and they got all these Grammy nods. They're well over what we paid for them 2 years ago. And just to know that they came to Stevens, if you're not into that music, but to see a name like that now so regularly on the radio, always consistently ranking like the top, top 40 every week. That's pretty awesome. But I think those are some different factors, and those are the conversations that I like to have with students when they're planning.
Yeah, I wasn't able to make it to On Point Music and Arts Festival, but I really wanted to see Say Goodnight.
Say goodnight! Yeah. Hey! God damn it,
Speaking of music, Thomas can play Careless Whisper.
That is true.
Wow.
Don't have my sax with me, unfortunately.
Next time we do this.
Hopefully, yes. Absolutely. For future campus-wide events, are you open to answering emails, text messages, and phone calls on the weekend?
Oh, that weekend time. I have found in working with students and even evening weekend programming, I am certainly there with On Point. I was there from 9 a.m. until the end of the event. Totally available there to support and assist. So the larger ones, absolutely. I wish if I had, was given more than 24 hours in a day, I would love to come to more nighttime events and support, because I do love to see what you all do. 9 o'clock is just a little difficult to sort of balance out the rest of my day's activities. But those that I'm working closely with for those larger scale, larger audience, I'm certainly open and have been. And students, I hope, know that they can always reach out to me, and I try and get back as quick as I can to them, or I'm physically there and happy to support.
My final question before we wrap up. What's your opinion on Peace Lilies versus Hydrangeas?
Unequivocally Hydrangeas. They are beautiful.
I go with the Peace Lilies myself, but I'm biased because I had them in my freshman dorm.
And I'm biased to Hydrangeas because they're going to be, I believe, at Founders Day Ball. If you go, that should be the flower of choice for the tables.
Nice, nice. All right, that's all the questions I had. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it.